What would you do if the man offering you a home was the same stranger whose face you once saw on a Forbes magazine cover while you were sleeping on a park bench? It was past midnight in Manhattan, and the city hummed with the kind of electricity that never sleeps. The rain had turned the streets into mirrors, reflecting towers of light that stretched into the sky like monuments to ambition. Beneath one of those towers, a glass monolith belonging to the Kelton Group, a woman sat curled under a thin gray blanket, her back pressed to the cold concrete wall of the building she didn't know belonged to a billionaire. Her name was Elise Warren. Her fingers were red from the cold, clutching a paper cup half filled with coins and the remnants of someone's pity. To passers-by, she was invisible, a shadow among many. But that night, something shifted. A black car, sleek and silent, pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and out stepped Adrian Kelton, a name that echoed through boardrooms and luxury magazines. The kind of man whose presence seemed to change the temperature of a room. He wasn't supposed to be there. His driver had taken a wrong turn after a late dinner meeting. But fate doesn't always knock politely. Sometimes it collides with you on a rain-slicked street at midnight. As Adrian adjusted his coat and started toward the building's entrance, he noticed the shape of Elise huddled beneath the awning, a flicker of movement, a cough, a tremor in her hands as she tried to sip rainwater from a cup. Something in that image stopped him. Maybe it was the way her eyes glimmered with something that wasn't just exhaustion. Or maybe it was because he'd seen that look before in the mirror, years ago, when he was the one standing in the rain with nothing but a broken dream. He walked past her, then stopped, turned. "Are you okay?" It was a simple question, but it hung in the air like an impossible offer. Elise looked up, startled. Her first instinct was fear. Men didn't stop for her, not at this hour, not dressed like that. She gave a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine," she said, her voice brittle. "You should go. You'll get wet." Adrian didn't move. Something about her tone, the quiet dignity in it, disarmed him. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card, and set it beside her cup. "If you ever need a real meal," he said, "come here tomorrow. Ask for me." He turned, stepped inside the building, and disappeared into the elevator, leaving behind the soft echo of his footsteps and a woman who wasn't sure if she'd imagined the whole thing. That night, Elise stared at the card under the flickering streetlight. Kelton Group. It read. She'd seen that name before on billboards, on news feeds, on the mouths of people who talked about money like it was air. It felt absurd, out of reach. Still, she tucked the card into her jacket pocket and fell asleep listening to the steady rhythm of rain on concrete. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the city had lost none of its indifference. Elise woke to the sound of footsteps and car horns, the smell of coffee drifting from somewhere she couldn't afford to go. She looked at the card again. Logic told her to throw it away. People didn't just offer help like that, not without wanting something. But hunger has a way of drowning out suspicion. By noon, she was standing in front of the building again, the same tower of glass that had watched her sleep. Inside, marble floors gleamed like liquid gold. She felt small, out of place, like an ink stain on a perfect white page. The receptionist looked up, her expression polite but uncertain. "I'm here to see Mr. Kelton," Elise said, her voice trembling. Moments later, a security guard escorted her into a private elevator. The ride felt endless. With every floor that passed, her reflection in the mirrored walls seemed to fade her worn jacket, the smudges of dirt on her hands. She wanted to disappear before the doors opened. But when they did, she found herself standing inside a world built from silence and light. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city like an endless ocean of glass and steel. And at the far end of the room, Adrian Kelton stood, looking out. He turned. "You came." Elise didn't know what to say. Her eyes darted to the art on the walls, the sleek furniture, the impossible luxury of it all. "I don't belong here," she whispered. "Neither did I," he said softly. They sat across from each other, a billionaire and a woman who'd slept in subway stations. Over black coffee, she told him pieces of her story, the nursing job she lost when the hospital cut funding, the eviction, the nights spent in shelters. She left out the worst parts. He didn't press. Instead, he listened, the way people do when they recognize a truth that mirrors their own. When she finished, Adrian leaned back. "You remind me of someone," he said. "My mother. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. When she died, I swore no one else who was willing to fight that hard should have to do it alone." Then he said something that changed everything. "I have an extra room in my penthouse. It's empty. You can stay there until you get back on your feet." Elise blinked. The offer felt unreal, like the setup to a cruel joke. "Why me?" she asked. "Because," he said, "you didn't ask." That night, Elise stood in the penthouse guest room, staring out over the city that had once swallowed her whole. The bed beneath her was softer than anything she'd felt in years. Yet, she couldn't sleep. The question kept echoing in her head. What does he want from me? Days turned into weeks. Adrian rarely spoke about his personal life. He worked long hours, vanishing into meetings and phone calls that seemed to shape the world outside those glass walls. But when he was home, he'd ask about her, what she was reading, what she wanted to do next. Slowly, the silence between them softened. Elise started volunteering at a shelter nearby, the same one she'd once stayed in. Adrian funded a renovation project there, quietly, under her name. But the more she rebuilt her life, the more she noticed something in him, a loneliness that money couldn't disguise. One evening, as the sun bled orange over the skyline, she found him on the balcony, glass of whiskey in hand, staring into nothing. "Do you ever stop working?" she asked, half smiling. He chuckled. "Not really. Work's the only thing that listens." She joined him, the wind teasing her hair. "Maybe you're just talking to the wrong people." Their eyes met just long enough for something unspoken to pass between them, but before she could read it, he looked away. The following week, whispers began circulating in the media. A photograph, grainy, taken from the street showed Elise entering the Kelton Tower. The headline read, "Mystery woman living with billionaire Adrian Kelton." Suddenly, the world that had ignored her was now watching her every move. When Elise saw the article, her hand shook. "I can't stay here," she told him. "They'll twist everything. They'll say what they always do." Adrian interrupted. "That they know me, that they understand what I'm doing. Let them talk." But his calm only made her more uneasy. She realized that while she was beginning to rebuild her life, she was also becoming part of his story, one she didn't understand. That night, unable to sleep, she walked through the apartment in silence. In his study, she found a single photograph on his desk, a young woman, smiling. Her face was familiar not from memory, but from resemblance. The woman in the photo looked like her. The resemblance was uncanny, the same eyes, the same quiet curve of a smile. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, was a name, Clara Kelton. Elise froze. That name Kelton, she felt the weight of it like a chill running through her spine. She didn't know who Clara was, but something told her this was not just coincidence. When Adrian appeared in the doorway behind her, his voice was calm, but his expression wasn't. "You weren't supposed to see that." Elise turned, her heart pounding. "Who is she?" For a moment, he said nothing. Then he stepped closer, eyes fixed on the photo. "My sister," he said quietly. "She disappeared 15 years ago." Elise felt her throat tighten. "And you think?" He looked up, his gaze unreadable. "I don't know what to think." Outside, the city lights flickered against the glass, the sound of distant thunder rolling over the skyline. Inside, the silence between them stretched, heavy and uncertain. For the first time since she'd met him, Elise realized something she hadn't before. Maybe she wasn't the only one being rescued. Maybe she was part of something much larger. But what she didn't know yet was that the truth behind Clara Kelton's disappearance and why Adrian had really stopped that night in the rain was about to unravel everything she thought she'd escaped. And when it did, nothing, not the penthouse, not the kindness, not even the promise of a new life would ever look the same again. The storm didn't stop that night. It rolled over Manhattan like a restless animal, the kind that never sleeps and doesn't forget. Elise stood by the window, her reflection trembling in the glass, lightning tracing faint lines across her face. Behind her, Adrian's footsteps faded into another room, leaving only the low hum of the city far below. She couldn't unsee the photograph. The woman Clara wasn't just similar. She was almost identical. Same eyes, same hairline, same faint dimple at the corner of her mouth. It wasn't resemblance anymore. It was haunting. Elise picked up the photograph again, her fingers trembling. The back read only Clara Kelton 2008. No other details. The ink had begun to blur, as if time itself wanted to hide what had happened to her. She traced the name, whispering it under her breath, trying to imagine the girl behind the smile. That's when Adrian returned, silent as shadow. "You should get some rest," he said, voice calm but eyes distant. "I can't," she replied. "You said she disappeared. How?" He hesitated. "She was 19. Left home one morning and never came back. Police found her phone near the Hudson. They said it was a runaway case, but she wouldn't have left, not without saying something." Elise watched him closely. "You never found her?" He shook his head. "No, only pieces, rumors. People who claimed to have seen her in shelters years later, but nothing real." His voice cracked slightly, barely audible, but enough. "She was everything I wasn't. Gentle, kind, she wanted to help people. Maybe that's why I saw her in you." The silence between them stretched like glass, clear but fragile. Elise wanted to ask if he thought she was Clara, but the question hung heavy in her throat. Instead, she nodded and left the room. In her bedroom, the rain softened to a whisper. Sleep came in broken pieces. When she did dream, it was of water, dark, endless, and full of faces she couldn't recognize. Morning arrived, gray and slow. The news hadn't let go of the mystery woman headline. Reporters waited outside the Kelton Tower, their cameras pointed at the entrance like hungry eyes. Adrian's assistant advised her to stay inside until things cooled off, but Elise felt like a prisoner in a palace. She began spending hours in the Penthouse library, flipping through old company files, newspapers, anything she could find about Adrian's family. It didn't take long before she realized how little there was. No interviews, no family photos beyond the occasional corporate feature. Clara seemed to have been erased from every public record. Late one afternoon, she found an old box tucked away behind leather-bound ledgers in the library. Inside were photographs, faded Polaroids of a girl laughing on a dock, her hair caught by the wind. Clara again. In one picture, she stood beside a boy who had to be Adrian, his arms slung round her shoulder, their faces full of something that looked like peace. At the bottom of the box was a small notebook, water-damaged but still legible. The first page read, "If something happens to me, don't believe what they say." Elise froze. Her pulse quickened as she turned the pages, each filled with scribbles, lists of names, sketches of places, none of it making full sense. But one word appeared again and again: shelter. She remembered the one she'd lived in, the Haven Outreach Center, the one Adrian had quietly donated to in her name, the one where, according to his story, Clara had last been rumored to be seen. That night, she waited until Adrian was asleep. The city glowed outside like a restless sea of glass and noise. She slipped out quietly, her reflection vanishing into the elevator's mirrored walls. The streets smelled of rain and metal. By the time she reached the Haven shelter, the city had grown quiet again. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed weakly, casting everything in a pale, ghostly hue. A volunteer at the desk looked up as she entered. "Can I help you? I used to stay here," she said. "Years ago." The woman nodded, friendly but cautious. "A lot of people did." Elise hesitated. "Do you remember someone named Clara Kelton?" The volunteer's expression changed to a flicker of recognition, followed by guarded silence. "That name's not on record," she said carefully. "But there was a girl once. Looked a bit like you, actually. Came here a long time ago. Sweet kid. Didn't talk much. She disappeared one night. No one ever found her." Elise felt her stomach twist. "Do you remember anything else?" "She used to draw," the woman said. "Always sketches of water." Said it made her feel calm. Elise left soon after, her mind racing. When she returned to the penthouse, Adrian was waiting, his expression unreadable. "You went out," he said simply. "I had to," she replied. "I found your sister's notebook." For a moment the air between them was ice. Then he nodded. "You shouldn't have gone alone." "Why?" "Because I might find something you don't want me to." His eyes hardened. "Because you don't understand how deep this goes." He turned away, but she caught the faint tremor in his hand. "You think she's still alive?" Elise said quietly. "I don't know what to think anymore." In the days that followed, tension coiled between them like a living thing. Adrian buried himself in meetings, while Elise kept returning to the notebook, piecing together fragments of a life lost in shadows. The more she read, the clearer it became Clara had discovered something before she vanished. Something about the Kelton Foundation. The entry spoke of money redirected from charity programs, of false projects tied to private accounts. It was all vague, coded, but the implication was clear. Someone inside the company had been laundering funds under the guise of humanitarian work. One night, Elise confronted Adrian with what she'd found. "You knew about this," she said. "You knew your company was covering up something." He looked exhausted, older than she'd ever seen him, I suspected. "But I never had proof." Clara tried to find it. She got too close, so whoever took her, he interrupted, voice breaking slightly. "Don't. I've gone over it 1,000 times. I can't prove anything. I don't even know if she's dead." Elise stepped closer. "Then let's find out." For the first time, he didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a man haunted by ghosts of his own making. Together, they began retracing Clara's last days, visiting old addresses, shelters, small cafes, listed in her notes. Each place was a puzzle piece from a vanished life. They learned that Clara had been volunteering under a different name, Lena Hart, helping women escape abusive situations. One of those women, a woman named Rosa, now lived upstate. They drove there one gray morning, the road cutting through mist like a secret they weren't supposed to uncover. Rosa's house was small, the kind that carried quiet memories. When she opened the door and saw Elise, she froze. "You," she whispered. "You look just like her." Elise's heart pounded. "Clara." Rosa nodded slowly. "She saved me, got me away from someone dangerous, but she was scared. Said people were watching her, that she'd found something she shouldn't have." "What happened to her?" Adrian asked. Rosa's eyes dimmed. "She said if anything happened, I should tell someone named Adrian that she loved him but couldn't come back then. She left. 2 days later, a man came looking for her fancy suit, expensive car. I never saw her again." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Did she say who he was?" Rosa shook her head. "Only that he worked for the foundation." When they left, silence filled the car. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft and relentless. Back in the city, Elise couldn't stop thinking about Rosa's words. If Clara had uncovered corruption inside the Kelton Foundation, it meant the threat wasn't from outside, it was from Adrian's own world. That evening, as she looked out over the skyline, she noticed something strange. Across the street, a black sedan had been parked for hours. Its windows were tinted, the engine off, but she could feel the eyes behind the glass. When she turned to tell Adrian, he was already standing by the window, watching the same car. "They'd been there for 3 days, he said quietly. "Who are they?" "I don't know." For the first time, fear crept into his voice. The following morning, his assistant, Julia, called in sick. An hour later, Adrian received a package with no return address. Inside was a single photograph of Clara, standing on a street corner, dated just 6 months ago. Elise stared at it, disbelief flooding her chest. She's alive. Adrian's hands shook as he held the photo. Or someone wants us to think she is. He looked up, eyes meeting hers. We're being pulled into something we don't understand. That night they argued. You're hiding something, Elise said. You knew this would happen. I didn't know this, he snapped. You think I planned it? You think I wanted to find her this way? You brought me here, she said, voice trembling. You saw me in the street, and somehow you knew. You said I reminded you of her, but it's more than that, isn't it? His silence was an answer. Elise's eyes filled with tears. You thought I might be her. I didn't know, he said softly. I just saw her face again and you saved me because you wanted to save her. The words hit him like a blow. He turned away, his reflection fractured in the glass. Maybe I did. Elise walked to the door, her voice barely a whisper. Then maybe you never saw me at all. She left before he could speak. The elevator doors closed between them with a hollow sound that echoed long after she was gone. Outside, the city was alive with stormlight again. The rain turned into fog by dawn, wrapping the city in a strange, silvery stillness, the kind that made everything look softer, quieter, almost forgiving. But forgiveness had no place in Elise's mind that morning. Her thoughts were sharp, erratic, tangled in the revelation she couldn't escape. She walked without direction, past storefronts just beginning to open, past faces that didn't know her name. Her shoes soaked through hours ago, but she didn't care. Somewhere between the pounding of her heart and the hum of traffic, the thought kept repeating like an echo that wouldn't fade. What if I'm not who I think I am? It sounded insane. Yet, every memory she tried to hold on to seemed fragile, incomplete, like pages torn from a book she never finished reading. She could remember moments, her mother's perfume, the sound of an old kettle boiling, a small house with faded yellow curtains but no one to anchor them to. No records, no photos, just fragments. And now there was this woman, Clara Kelton, a ghost with her face. By midday, Elise found herself back at the Haven shelter. The same volunteer from before wasn't there, but a man she hadn't seen before sat behind the desk, watching her with an odd intensity. I'm looking for files, she said, trying to sound calm. Old records, residents from about 15 years ago. He raised an eyebrow. That's a long time, I know, but it's important. He hesitated, then sighed. Follow me. The back room smelled of dust and old paper. Metal cabinets lined the walls, their drawers marked with faded years. He opened one, flipping through folders. Most of the old files were digitized, he said. But a few. He stopped. What is it? Elise asked. He pulled out a thin file. Its tab labeled Lena Hart, the same name from Clara's notebook. He glanced at her, then handed it over. Inside were intake forms, a photograph paper clipped to the corner, a woman with long hair, eyes soft but wary. Clara, or was it? The photo was old, the resolution poor, but Elise felt her chest tighten. The resemblance wasn't just close, it was identical. Same birthmark near the temple, same scar along the chin, her own scar. She stumbled back, gripping the edge of the cabinet. This can't be real. You okay? The man asked, stepping forward. She nodded quickly, forcing air into her lungs. Yeah, I need to take this. I'm not supposed to let these out. Please, just for a night. I'll bring it back. Something in her voice must have convinced him, because he handed her the file with a quiet nod. Be careful with it. That one's strange. We were told not to delete it, even after the woman was declared missing. Declared missing. He nodded again, uneasy. 2 weeks after she arrived, cops came, asked questions, then told us to forget about it. Elise clutched the folder tighter and left without another word. By the time she reached the penthouse, her hands were shaking. Adrian wasn't there. She sat at the kitchen island, spreading the papers across the marble counter. There was an intake form listing Lena Hart, age 27, with no listed address. Under medical notes, possible memory gaps, trauma-related amnesia. Her breath caught. She flipped to the next page, handwriting evaluations. Notes from a shelter therapist. Displays dissociative symptoms, claims no memory of past 5 years, mentions recurring dream involving water, the same dream she'd had since before she could remember. The page blurred as she read the next line, possible connection to missing person case. Clara Kelton details pending verification. The pen slipped from her hand. For a long moment she couldn't move. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of a clock, all of it seemed to fade into the distance. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass wall to faces, overlapping, shifting, merging until she didn't know which one was hers. The front door opened. Adrian stepped in, rain dripping from his coat. Elise, he said, surprised. You're back. She turned slowly. Who am I? He froze. What? Don't, she said, voice breaking. Don't lie. You knew. You knew there was a chance I wasn't just someone who looked like her. He set his briefcase down, his jaw tight. I didn't know for sure, but you suspected, yes. His voice was low, almost a whisper. When I saw you that night, something in me, something I'd buried, woke up. I told myself it was coincidence, that you were just someone who needed help. But the more I watched you, the way you spoke, the way you moved, it was like seeing her again. She took a step back. So what? You thought bringing me here would make her come back. I thought maybe I could save her this time. Elise's voice rose. Save her or replace her. The silence that followed was unbearable. Adrian's eyes softened, but there was pain behind them. You don't understand what it's like to lose someone and see their ghost walking the streets. I didn't plan this. She cut him off. What if I am her, Adrian? What if I'm Clara and I don't even know it? He looked away, unable to answer. That night, Elise didn't sleep. She replayed every fragment of memory she could summon, but each one felt distant, borrowed. She remembered a hand reaching through water, a voice calling her name, but the name wasn't Elise. In the morning, she called the number listed on the old therapy notes. A disconnected line. She tried another emergency contact, marked only as Dr. V. Rayner. To her surprise, someone answered. This is Dr. Rayner. Her voice trembled. I'm calling about a former patient. Lena Hart. There was a pause. Then the man spoke carefully. Who is this? Elise Warren. I think I might be her. Silence stretched through the line. Then, in a tone she couldn't quite read, he said, Where are you calling from? Manhattan. Another pause. Then, you need to come see me, but not here. Meet me at 9 p.m. tomorrow. The corner of Hudson and 54th. Don't tell anyone. The line went dead. When she told Adrian she was going out the next night, he didn't question her. He seemed tired, withdrawn, as if he knew something was slipping from his control. At 9 p.m., the streets near the Hudson were quiet, the kind of quiet that carried danger beneath it. Fog rolled off the water, swallowing the glow of the streetlights. A man stepped out of the shadows, mid-50s, heavy coat, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Dr. Rayner. He nodded. So it's true. You're alive. Alive. I thought they were lying when they said you'd died. Her pulse quickened. Who's they? He looked around nervously. I can't stay long. 15 years ago, a woman named Clara Kelton came to me. She said she'd uncovered financial crimes inside her brother's company. She was scared. She'd found evidence linking the Kelton Foundation to illegal human trials. Elise blinked. Trials. He nodded. Experimental therapy. Unauthorized. People with trauma, amnesia, identity disorders. She volunteered to expose them, but before she could go public, she disappeared. Elise's heart pounded. And you think I'm her? I don't know what they did to you, but the woman standing here is the same woman I treated as Clara. Your memories were wiped, rewritten. They called it restructuring therapy. She stepped back, her stomach twisting. Adrian would never. He cut her off. I don't think it was him, but it was someone close, someone inside his world. Before she could ask more, headlights cut through the fog. A black sedan rolled up to the curb. Rayner's expression changed instantly. They found us. Go. She turned, running down the street as doors slammed and footsteps followed. She ducked into an alley, heart hammering. Behind her, she heard a struggle, shouts, then silence. When she looked back, the sedan was gone. So was Dr. Rayner. By the time she reached the penthouse, it was nearly midnight. Adrian was waiting, his expression cold, unreadable. Where were you? He asked quietly. I met someone, she said, breathless. Dr. Rayner. He knew Clara. He said, Rayner's dead. The words hit her like a blade. What? He died years ago. Car crash. There's no way you met him. Elise shook her head, backing away. No, he was real. He knew everything. Adrian stepped closer. Listen to me. People are trying to manipulate you. Whoever sent that photograph, whoever's following us, they want to break you, to make you doubt what's real. Then why can't I remember anything before 6 years ago? She shouted. He didn't answer. His silence told her everything. She turned toward the door, but his hand caught her wrist, not rough, but desperate. Elise, please. You don't know what's happening. If you leave now, you might never come back. Tears welled in her eyes. Maybe that's the point. She pulled free and walked out, her heart pounding in her chest. The city outside was a blur of motion and sound, sirens in the distance, the smell of rain and iron thick in the air. She wandered until her legs ached, until she found herself standing at the edge of the Hudson, the same river where Clara's phone had once been found. The water shimmered under the moonlight, black and endless. She stared at it, half expecting to see her reflection staring back as someone else entirely. Then something caught her eye, a glint, near the rocks below. She climbed down, hands scraping against the wet stone, and pulled free a small, rusted tin box half buried in the mud. Inside, wrapped in plastic, were photographs of her, in the same shelter years ago, standing beside people she didn't recognize. And one photo that froze her blood. Her and Adrian, not recent, told her. He looked younger, but unmistakably him. His arm around her shoulders, both smiling, written on the back in faint, smeared ink, for when you forget again. The wind picked up, scattering rain across her face as she stood there trembling, the world tilting beneath her feet. If the photograph was real, then everything she believed, her name, her past, even the night he found her, had been part of something far more deliberate. And as the city lights flickered across the water, Elise whispered to herself, voice barely audible against the storm. What did you do to me, Adrian? The photograph trembled in her hands as rain pooled around her feet, washing the mud from the rocks. The ink on the back blurred, the words dissolving into the paper until they were barely legible, but she didn't need them anymore. The image was enough. The proof was enough. Adrian hadn't found her by accident. He had been looking for her. She felt her pulse hammering against her throat, her breath shallow, unsteady. The wind off the Hudson carried the bitter tang of rust and water, the sound of waves slapping against the embankment like a heartbeat growing louder, closer. Somewhere behind her a siren wailed, distant but growing nearer. She slipped the photo into her coat pocket and began walking. The city lights smeared across her vision like watercolors in motion. Every sound seemed amplified, the rush of cars, the soft crackle of her wet shoes on concrete, the low growl of thunder rolling through the clouds above. By the time she reached Kelton Tower, her body was shaking not from the cold, but from the storm building inside her. The lobby was nearly empty, the security guard glancing up as she passed, but saying nothing. The elevator ride felt endless, the soft hum of machinery punctuated by the rhythm of her heartbeat. When the doors opened, Adrian was standing by the window, staring out over the city. He didn't turn when she entered. "I went to the river," she said. He didn't answer. "I found something." Still nothing. His silence was heavy, deliberate. She took a step closer. "You knew me before, didn't you?" Finally, he spoke. "You shouldn't have gone there." "Why?" "Because I wasn't supposed to remember." Her voice cracked. "Because you thought I'd just keep living this lie." He turned then, his expression unreadable, eyes dark and tired. "You don't understand what remembering will do to you." "You mean what it'll do to you." The words landed like a slap, echoing in the vast glass-walled room. Outside, lightning split the sky, casting both of them in a flash of white light. For a moment, the reflection in the window doubled them to ghosts trapped in a cage of glass and shadow. Adrian exhaled slowly, walking toward her. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to drag you into this mess again? Then tell me what this is," she shouted. "Tell me what you did to me." He stopped a few feet away, eyes locked on hers. "You were dying." Her breath caught. He continued, voice low but steady. 15 years ago, when you found out about the experiments, you went to the press. Someone inside the foundation, someone powerful decided you were a threat. You were attacked near the Hudson. They left you there." She shook her head. "No, that's not possible. I would remember you were in a coma for months," he said. "When you woke up, you couldn't even remember your own name. I thought I'd lost you forever." He ran a hand through his hair, the mask of composure cracking. "I paid to have you moved, privately, to protect you. They said they could help rebuild your mind, your memories. I didn't know what they meant by that until it was too late." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You let them experiment on me. I didn't know," he said, louder now, desperate. "I thought they were saving you. They said the therapy would restore what you'd lost, but instead they rewired you, erased everything that tied you to the Kelton name, to me. When I found out, I tried to stop them, but by then you were already gone." The room was silent except for the rain against the glass. Alice Scleroid ever she was stared at him, the truth burning through her like fire. "You destroyed me." He shook his head. "No, I saved you. You were already dead in their eyes. I gave you another life, a life built on lies," she said, "on someone else's guilt." He took a step closer, his voice breaking. "You don't understand, Clara. You can't imagine what it was like seeing you alive again after all these years. I thought I could fix it. I thought if I just brought you back, maybe everything else would make sense." She flinched at the name Clara. It felt foreign and familiar all at once, a word that resonated somewhere deep beneath the cracks of her identity. "Stop calling me that," she said quietly. He hesitated. "Then who are you?" "I don't know," she whispered, "but I'm not yours to name." The silence that followed felt like the breath before collapse. Adrian turned away, pressing his hand against the glass, the city glowing beneath him like a restless sea. Outside, the thunder deepened, the lights flickered. Somewhere below, the sound of sirens drew closer, louder this time, like a storm advancing from the ground up. "Someone's coming," he said. "They know you've been asking questions. You shouldn't have gone to Raina." Her heart twisted. "You said he was dead." "He is, or he was supposed to be." He turned toward her, urgency cutting through his voice. "You need to leave the city. Tonight, there's a plane waiting." "I'm not running again," she said. He stepped closer, his voice softer now, pleading. "If you stay, they'll find you. And this time they won't make the mistake of keeping you alive." She looked at him for a long moment, the man who had once been her brother, her savior, her captor. The lines between those words blurred until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Then she noticed something. The faint glint of a reflection behind him, movement in the glass, a figure, standing in the hallway. "Adrian," she said quietly. He turned. The door to the penthouse was open. A woman stepped inside, her heels silent on the marble floor. She was dressed in black, her expression composed but cold. Elise recognized her instantly. "Julia, Adrian's assistant." "Sorry to interrupt," Julia said, her voice smooth, practiced, "but we need to talk." Adrian's posture shifted. "Not now. I'm afraid it can't wait," Julia replied. "You should have stayed quiet, Adrian. You've put everything at risk." He stiffened. "You were part of it." Julia smiled faintly. "We all were. The board couldn't afford another scandal. Not after what your sister found." Her eyes flicked to Elise, or should I say what she used to know. Elise's stomach turned. You worked for them, you helped cover it up. Julia's tone was calm, almost regretful. You weren't supposed to remember. The therapy was meant to make sure of that, but Adrian couldn't leave well enough alone. He had to bring you back. Adrian took a step forward. If you touch her, Julia raised a small remote. Pressing a button, a soft beep echoed, and suddenly the lights dimmed, plunging the room into shadow. The city outside glowed faintly through the storm. I don't want to hurt her, Julia said, but we can't let her exist as both people. Not after all this time. You understand that, don't you? The words hung in the air like smoke. Elise's pulse pounded. She reached into her pocket and gripped the rusted tin box still inside her coat. The photos, the evidence, everything that tied her to the past was in there. Adrian's voice cut through the tension. If you touch her, I swear. Julia's expression didn't change. It's too late for threats. The elevator dinged behind her. 2 men in suits stepped out, security or something worse. Their eyes were cold, their movements efficient. Adrian grabbed Elise's hand. Come on. They ran through the penthouse, past the study, down the narrow corridor that led to the service stairwell. The sound of footsteps followed, measured, relentless. Adrian, she gasped. Where does this lead? To the basement, he said. There's another exit through the garage. They burst through the stairwell door. The echo of their footsteps clanged through the narrow metal space, spiraling down floor after floor. Above them, the footsteps grew fainter, replaced by the hiss of the storm outside. When they reached the bottom, Adrian shoved open a heavy door leading into a dim, underground parking level. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows between the concrete pillars. Elise leaned against a wall, breath ragged. You knew they'd come for us. I hoped they wouldn't, he said, but I always knew they might. She stared at him, the weight of everything pressing down, fear, betrayal, love twisted into something unrecognizable. Why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning? Because I thought I could protect you, he said quietly. And because I wasn't ready to lose you again. Before she could respond, a sharp click echoed across the garage. A voice Julius called out, smooth and echoing through the space. Adrian, it's over. There's nowhere left to run. He turned toward Elise, his eyes fierce. Take the car, go. I'm not leaving you, she said. Yes, you are, he said, pressing something into her hand, a keycard. There's a vault under the Foundation's archive. Everything's in there. Every file, every name, every truth. And this. Her fingers closed around the card, trembling. What about you? He gave a faint, broken smile. I'll hold them off. Before she could argue, a gunshot cracked through the air. The sound echoed like thunder inside the concrete chamber. Adrian staggered. She caught him as he fell, his blood spreading warm against her hands. His eyes found hers, dimming but steady. Remember who you are, he whispered. The sound of footsteps drew closer. Julia's voice cut through the air. Take her alive. Elise looked down at Adrian, at the man who had destroyed and saved her in equal measure, and something inside her snapped. She slipped the keycard into her pocket and ran. The storm outside greeted her with open arms, the city lights blurring through rain and tears as she disappeared into the night, carrying the weight of 2 lives, and the truth that neither could survive the other. Behind her, the tower loomed against the lightning sky, a monument to everything she'd lost, and somewhere deep beneath it, waiting in the dark, the truth waited, ready to rewrite everything she thought she knew. Rain fell in silver streaks across the windshield, the wipers struggling to keep pace as the car tore through the city. The streets shimmered like veins of light beneath the storm, every reflection stretching and twisting through the blur of motion. Elise's hands gripped the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Adrian's blood still clung to her palms, dark and tacky. She could feel it drying in the creases of her skin, a reminder of the life she'd just watched drain away. The keycard in her pocket burned against her thigh, small and unassuming, yet heavier than anything she had ever carried. She drove until the skyline thinned, until glass gave way to brick and rust. The address Adrian had whispered before he fell repeated in her head like a heartbeat. Vault under the archive. She didn't know how much time she had. Every red light felt like a countdown. Every shadow could have been Julia's men. By the time she reached the old Kelton Foundation archive, dawn was a faint bruise on the horizon. The building loomed against the fog like a mausoleum, its glass facade fractured, its logo half erased by time and neglect. She parked a block away, stepping out into the wet air, the city still humming faintly behind her like a restless animal. Inside, the air smelled of dust and rain-soaked paper. The marble floors were cracked, littered with the ghosts of old projects boxes labeled MedSet and Today's Neurophase, Human Restoration. It wasn't an archive anymore. It was a graveyard. She moved slowly through the dim hall, every sound amplified by the silence. A light flickered in the far corridor, one bulb still clinging to life. That was where she found it. A reinforced steel door, unmarked except for a narrow card reader beside it. Her hand shook as she swiped the card. A soft click echoed, then the door slid open with a low mechanical sigh. Beyond it, a staircase spiraled downward into darkness. She descended, the air growing colder with each step, the sound of her breathing loud in the confined space. At the bottom waited a narrow hall lined with glass panels, each revealing rooms filled with servers, machines, and stacks of old patient files. In the center stood a terminal still running, its glow the only light in the room. She approached slowly. The screen flickered, revealing the Kelton Foundation emblem before lines of data scrolled across. She typed her name, Elise, then hesitated and added the other, Clara. The system paused. Then the monitor filled with files. Her heart thudded as she opened the first. There she was, a photo dated 15 years earlier, the same eyes, the same scar beneath her chin, but her hair was darker, her expression sharper, more alive. The file was labeled Subject, See Kelton Neural Reconstruction Trial. She clicked through the report. Memory loss sustained during assault. Initiate prototype phase 3. Subject's synaptic response is adaptable. Transfer successful. Previous identity redacted. Transfer, she froze. Not erased, not rewired. Transferred. She opened the next file, her fingers trembling. The images blurred brain scans, neurological maps, notes written in Adrian's handwriting, then a single video file. She hesitated, then pressed play. Static, then a voice. Adrian's, if you're watching this, it means I failed. The camera shifted, revealing him sitting in a dim room, the same room she stood in now. He looked younger, exhausted. They told me it would save her, he said. They said we could preserve consciousness itself, move it like data. I thought I was giving her a second chance, but I didn't realize what they'd done until too late. He looked off camera, voice breaking. The procedure didn't heal her, it copied her. They left the original to die, and built a mirror that could live without remembering. You, Elise, you're not her replacement. You're her continuation. She stared at the screen, her mind spinning. The room seemed to tilt. You carry her memory somewhere deep inside. Adrian's voice continued. They couldn't destroy them completely. They buried them. That's why you dream things you've never lived, why you remember pain that doesn't belong to you, because it does belong to you. He leaned forward, his expression raw. If you're watching this, you have to finish what we started. The Foundation is still using the program, rebuilding identities, erasing those who speak out. End it, burn it to the ground. The screen flickered and went dark. Elise stood in silence, the hum of the servers like a low, steady heartbeat. The truth pressed against her chest until she could barely breathe. She wasn't a ghost. She wasn't a lie. She was both the memory and the aftermath, woman Adrian had tried to save and the one he'd accidentally created. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened glass, two faces merging, the past and present folding together until she could no longer tell them apart. Then she heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, closing in from the stairwell. Julia's voice echoed faintly. I told you there was nowhere left to run. Elise turned toward the sound, her body tense but her mind clear now, frighteningly calm. You knew, she said. Julia appeared in the doorway, rain still glistening in her hair. She held a pistol loosely at her side. Of course I knew. You think I'd serve this long without understanding the cost? You helped them destroy people. Julia's expression flickered, something almost like guilt. We told ourselves we were saving them, curing trauma, resetting pain. The board called it progress. Elise's voice sharpened. You turned human lives into data. Julia stepped closer. You were our first success. The word struck harder than a blow. Elise backed toward the terminal, her fingers brushing the controls. Then let me be your last. Julia hesitated, her eyes narrowing. What are you doing? Elise entered a Command-Delete directory, then paused over the confirmation prompt. Julia raised the gun. Don't. Elise looked at her, rainwater and tears glistening on her face. You took everything from me, but you can't own what I've become. She pressed enter. The servers roared to life, lights flashing red. Data cascaded across the screens like falling stars, years of secrets, experiments, lives erased in a digital storm. Julia fired. The bullet struck the glass beside Elise, shattering it into 1,000 glinting fragments. She dove to the floor, the sharp scent of gunpowder mingling with ozone. Alarms blared, the entire vault trembling as the system began its irreversible purge. Julia advanced through the chaos, her voice cutting through the noise. You think this changes anything? There are backups. There's always another vault. Elise crawled toward the fallen glass, grabbed a jagged shard and rose slowly to her feet. Then I'll find everyone. Julia aimed again, but before she could fire, a blast of steam erupted from the ruptured cooling vents. The air filled with fog and flashing red lights. Elise moved through it like a shadow, closing the distance between them. A struggle, a flash, the gun clattered to the floor. Julia stumbled, her hand pressed to her side, eyes wide with shock. Elise caught her as she fell, lowering her gently to the floor. Julia looked up at her, breath shallow. "He really loved you, you know," she whispered. "That was his downfall." Elise's throat tightened. Then maybe love wasn't his mistake. Maybe believing in redemption was. Julia's eyes dimmed. The alarms quieted. The hum of the servers faded into silence. Smoke curled in thin ribbons through the vault, mingling with the scent of rain and iron. Elise stood amid the ruin. Her reflection fractured across the shattered glass. Two faces. One fate. She walked back to the terminal. Only one file remained untouched. A name, hers. She opened it. Inside was a single line of text. End protocol, subject autonomy restored. Her chest rose and fell in silence. For the first time she felt real. Whole. Both women. Both histories. The storm outside was beginning to break. The first threads of dawn bleeding through the glass ceiling above. She stepped toward the stairwell. The faint sound of sirens somewhere in the distance. As she climbed, the building shuddered, an old beast finally collapsing under the weight of its own lies. When she reached the surface, the city stretched before her, glistening under pale sunlight. The rain had stopped. Steam rose from the streets like the world was exhaling. She turned once toward the tower of smoke behind her, then faced forward. The skyline shimmered, new and unfamiliar, yet hers. Every step she took felt like reclaiming something she hadn't realized was missing. Adrian's voice echoed faintly in her memory. "Remember who you are." She smiled, faint, broken but alive. "I remember." And as the morning light touched her face, the two names Elise and Clara finally ceased to fight. They simply became one. The past had burned away, and in its ashes, she began to walk toward whatever waited next. No longer a copy, no longer a ghost, just a woman, whole again, carrying her own truth into the dawn. The wind was softer now. It brushed through her hair like a hand smoothing the edge of a torn page. The city beneath her stretched wide and silent, washed in the pale gold of morning. The storm had passed, but its scent still lingered in the air, a mix of rain and metal and something new, something clean. Elise stood at the edge of the rooftop, the skyline shimmering like a promise she hadn't yet learned to believe in. For the first time, she wasn't running. She wasn't searching. She was simply standing still. Below her, the city was waking. Cars moved like veins of light through the streets. The sound of construction echoed from somewhere far away, rhythmic and human. People stepped out of doorways with coffee cups and tired smiles, unaware that beneath their feet, a world had ended. She reached into her coat pocket and took out the keycard, the same one Adrian had given her. It was cracked now, the data long gone, but she held it carefully, as if it still meant something. Maybe it did. Maybe it always would. In the distance, Kelton Tower still stood, though darkened and silent now. The company would deny everything. The board would hide behind polished statements and legal walls. But the truth, once seen, could never be unseen. The files might have burned, the data erased, but the story had already begun to spread. The reporters who had once ignored her now called her name. The whispers had become voices. The voices, threads of a truth weaving itself into something larger than any one person could contain. She had sent the last pieces out before she left the vault, a backup of Adrian's confession, encrypted, distributed. She didn't do it for revenge. She did it for clarity. For the people like her who had been rewritten, who still lived in the quiet spaces between what they remembered and what they had been made to forget. Now, as the first sunlight touched her skin, she felt something stir beneath her ribs, not pain, not grief, something gentler. She closed her eyes and breathed. The air filled her lungs like it was the first time. Memories came not in sharp flashes anymore, but in soft waves. The smell of lemon trees from a summer she hadn't realized she still remembered. The sound of laughter echoing in a hallway. A man's voice calling her name, once as Clara, then again as Elise. Both names threaded together, neither one canceling the other out. In that moment, She understood. Memory wasn't a fixed thing, not a box to be opened or closed. It was a current. It flowed, sometimes forward, sometimes back, sometimes in circles. She had been both lost and found inside it. She thought of Adrian, his last words, the look in his eyes. He had built an empire trying to rewrite loss, to hold on to what was slipping away. Maybe that was what made him human. Maybe all of them, in their own way, were trying to outwrite their endings. She walked away from the ledge and sat down on the rooftop, her legs pulled close. The morning wind lifted the loose strands of her hair, scattering them like threads of gold. Below, the city glowed in motion, ordinary, imperfect, alive. A small voice interrupted her thoughts. "Are you okay, miss?" She turned. A boy stood near the rooftop access door, holding a broom and a half-empty bucket of cleaning supplies. He looked no older than 16. His uniform had the logo of the maintenance company stitched in blue. She smiled faintly. "I think so," he hesitated. "You're not going to jump or anything, right?" She let out a small laugh, soft and unexpected. "No," she said. "Not today." He nodded, awkward but relieved. "Good. It's just, you looked kinda sad." "I was," she said, "but not in the way you think." He frowned, uncertain, then glanced at the view. "Pretty, huh? You can see the whole city from up here." She followed his gaze. The horizon shimmered with light. "Yes," she said, "it's beautiful. You just have to get high enough to see it." He nodded again, not really understanding, then gave a small wave before heading back through the door. Elise watched him go, her smile fading into something thoughtful. There was something pure about his presence, unaware of the labyrinths adults built around themselves, the lies dressed as truths, the stories rewritten until they forgot who they were trying to protect. She wondered if that innocence was something you could ever get back, or if growing older meant learning to live with the pieces of yourself you could never fully understand. A soft chime came from her pocket, her phone. The cracked screen lit up with a message. "We saw the files. Thank you." No name, no number, just that. She stared at it for a long time, her thumb hovering over the reply button. Then she typed 2 words. "Tell the others." The message sent, disappearing into the endless web of connection, of unseen faces and quiet revolution. Somewhere, someone would read it. Someone who needed to know that memory, once stolen, could still be reclaimed. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and stood again. The wind tugged at her coat, carrying with it the faint scent of the river, the same one where her old life had ended, and where this one had begun. She found herself walking, her steps slow and sure, down the metal stairs that led to the street. The world below greeted her with sound, the honk of a cab, the bark of a vendor, the murmur of life continuing as it always did, indifferent yet full of quiet mercy. She bought a coffee from a corner stand, black and hot, and leaned against a lamppost as the morning crowd passed. No one looked twice at her, and she liked it that way. She wasn't the billionaire's lost sister anymore. She wasn't a subject in someone's experiment. She was just another soul among millions alive, anonymous, free. As she sipped, she noticed a flyer taped to the post beside her, a photo of a missing woman. The eyes on the page looked familiar, not her, but someone else with the same hollow expression she had once worn. Beneath it were 3 words, "Help us remember." She traced the edge of the paper with her fingertips, then smiled. The city was full of echoes like that, fragments of people searching for themselves. When she finished her coffee, she dropped the empty cup into the bin and began to walk. She didn't know where she was going, but the not knowing felt good. The road ahead was wide and unclaimed. The sun climbed higher, catching on the windows of tall buildings until the whole skyline seemed to shimmer. It was almost too bright to look at, like the world itself was waking for the first time. And in that light, she thought of something Adrian once said, years before the storm, before everything fractured. "Maybe we're not meant to preserve what was, maybe we're meant to build what comes next." She whispered the words to herself, tasting them like truth. Every step carried her further from who she had been, yet closer to something truer. The air felt lighter, the noise of the city softer, as if the world had made space for her to exist within it. She paused at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. Across the street, a group of children laughed as they chased a red balloon that had slipped from someone's hand. It rose for a moment, trembling in the wind, then drifted upward, higher and higher, until it was just a speck of color against the pale morning sky. She watched it go, her eyes following its slow ascent. Maybe that was what freedom really was, not forgetting, but rising beyond what had broken you. Carrying the weight of your past, not as a chain, but as proof that you had lived, that you had survived. The light turned green. She crossed. Somewhere behind her, the world she had once known crumbled into memory. Ahead, the city stretched wide, full of noise and breath and endless possibility. And as she disappeared into the moving crowd, her reflection caught for a moment in a passing window. 2 faces finally merged into one, framed by the dawn. In that reflection lived a single, silent question, one that would linger long after she was gone. If our memories make us who we are, what do we become when we finally learn to forgive them? The wind moved again, scattering the last remnants of the storm. The city, golden now, began its day, and somewhere within it, Elise walked on, no longer a shadow of the past, but the quiet beginning of something new.